Ladies and gentlemen, we are live!
Lyrically, I'm untouchable, uncrushable. Running in a 600, running in a 600. Untouchable, uncrushable. Running in a 600, running in a 600.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode here of Punch the Face Radio. I'm your host, Brandon Stubbs. Appreciate you joining me here tonight. Fun show to talk about here tonight as we have Superfly that's finally going down here this Saturday, live on HBO, featuring 6 of the best super flyweights in the world. So we're going to definitely talk about those gentlemen and attempt to enunciate their names, which I'm being strongly encouraged on Twitter not to do, because if anyone who's listened to the show knows, I'm not good at enunciating foreign names or really names, period. And we are drinking as we're doing the show here tonight. So, hey, it's only going to get worse as the night goes on. So, obviously, talk about that, and as well as the World Boxing Super Series kicks off here this weekend. I'll talk about the first fight, a part of that card. We have some other fights going down this weekend, and also the return of Peter Quillin. We're not even really 60 seconds into the show, and I'm already stuttering, so this shit should be fun. But you can be a part of the fun by calling in at area code 929-477-3165. You can tweet me if you listen to the show live at BrandonP2TF. You can also email me anytime at brandon@punchtheface.com. So let's start off by talking Superfly. Superfly goes down here Saturday night, live on HBO, from the StubHub Center in Carson, California. 2 times in 3 weeks, Carson, California is the hub of boxing for that for SoCal area. Really great venue. One of those venues that I think I have to go see before I leave this earth. That's one of those kind of must-see venues. And it's really a hotbed for boxing there in California. That's what a lot of the better cards seem to be on, our more action-packed fights. And this time around, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have 6 of the best super flyweights in the world, hence the reason the nickname of Superfly being the name of this Saturday's card. So, first fight we're going to talk about, and I'm probably going to misenunciate the names, so I've already fair warned everybody who follows me on Twitter, is the rematch between Roman Gonzalez, a.k.a. Chocolito, and Circicate Sor Rungan VC, Rungan VC. We'll just go with that. But what we'll do for the abbreviation, we'll just call him SSR. So they had their first matchup here this past March, and it was a blood and guts fight, just truth be told, between Chocolito here in SSR, with SSR getting the nudge via majority decision. Now, there are a lot of controversy in regards to this because a lot of people thought that it was poorly scored, it was poorly officiated. You had a lot of people complaining about the matchup in itself in regards to when the fight was over, not the actual fight, because the fight delivered. The fight was a solid fight. Both gentlemen definitely brought it fight night. So it wasn't so much people were mad at the fight, they were just mad at the results. At that time when Chocolito lost, Chocolito was looked upon as being arguably or unarguably the number 1 fighter pound for pound in the world. He was at least in everyone's top 5, top 3, as being amongst the best fighters in the game today. With that loss, that knocked him off that perch and started making who's pound for pound number 1 a hell of a lot more murky. Now, it wasn't from lack of effort. Chocolito definitely, I thought, started on the second half of the fight, but he was at times, he was catching shots. And, to take nothing away from SSR, I thought he fought a hell of a fight, but I did think Chocolito did do enough to win the fight. I had him winning by at least 2 rounds. But in that fight, we saw Chocolito get bloodied up. We also heard, rumblings of him having issues with the weight leading up to the fight. Not so much of that here in the rematch. We're now looking at, almost 6 months later since their initial fight. So, a lot can change in 6 months for both fighters involved. But one thing I don't think is going to change, I think this is going to be a highly competitive fight that can really go either direction again. But knowing how everything played out here after the first fight, This is also going to be Chocolito's second fight without his trainer. His trainer passed away prior to the first fight. So I think he's going to be a little bit more well-adjusted, used to listening to a different ear in the corner, another voice in the corner here in the rematch compared to what he had to do here in the first matchup this past March. But, a lot's on the line for him. Is this one of those things where is Saturday night going to be redemption for Chocolito, or is for SSR, is it going to be his opportunity to prove it was no fluke, him winning and doing his thing here back in March? So that's really what it's going to come down to on both sides. Was it a fluke or was it legit? I'm going to lean more towards, I don't want to call it a fluke because you want to take nothing away from the fighters involved. But I think Roman is the more complete fighter of these two gentlemen. So I look for Roman to win the rematch. I look for Roman to, I don't want to say winning by a wide margin. I don't want to go that far. But I do look for Roman to win the fight. I think Roman's going to have a lot more tools to use, and he's going to be the one making the proper adjustments in the rematch compared to what SSR does, because Roman has a point to prove. He was everyone's darling, for the last year and a half up until that fight. He'd finally got his television exposure here with HBO. He's being able to piggyback on some of the fight cards the Triple G was on, so they share the same promoter in K2. He was really finally getting the recognition, worldwide that he had gotten from a lot of us hardcore boxing fans who knew of him, who would, watch the videos of him on YouTube. But now people are finally got an opportunity to see him in the masses. And for him to fall up short like he did here in March, I do think he's going to want to redeem himself, and I think he's going to want to get back to being looked upon as one of the best fighters there is in the world. That loss, granted, was a majority decision loss, that tarnished that for him and took him out of a lot of people's lists altogether, or at least out of the top 5 conversation after that majority decision loss. So that now brings me to my next question. If Roman were to win, is Roman back as being number 1 fighter pound for pound in the world? That's a tough call. I don't know if I can call Roman being number 1 again after a win. I don't see that happening. Shout out to my man Stay Cool Wills, a.k.a. Mad again. Oh, God. Stay Cool has actually answered this question. He says, I tweet out, can Roman be back to being pound for pound number 1 after a win? He says distinctively no. I think that's going to be definitely up for judgment. Now, depending on how he goes out and wins, you could say, okay, if he goes out and dominates his opponent, KOs him, looks like the Roman we've seen over the last, year to 2 years, you can make an argument. But it's going to be tough to say, to put him back above a guy like a Terrence Crawford, a guy like a Lomachenko, Andre Ward, who Lord knows I don't really like, but it's going to be tough to put him above those 3 guys right now in the pound-for-pound argument, because depending on what circle you're in, those 3 names are brought up as being pound-for-pound number 1. Next week, we may have another person you can add that entry in being Triple G or Canelo, depending on who wins and how they win in next week's fight. So will Chocolito be back at number 1? No. Will he be more in the conversation? Absolutely, but I can't see him topping Terrence Crawford right now. Terrence Crawford's number 1 for me. With Ward and Lomachenko, 2A and 2B, it's really a coin flip with either one of those guys, but I have Crawford as 1. I can't put Roman back at number 1 with the win on Saturday, but he will be definitely back on the radar as being amongst the best fighters there is in the world. So, there's that, but it's one of those things to where I really look for Roman to go back out and just be the Roman we've been used to seeing. I just can't see him, taking another step backwards and losing back-to-back fights. No matter how close it is on the cards, I just don't see that happening. Now, for SSR, for Rung VC, he's not a terrible fighter. I mean, we have to keep in mind, prior to the win over Roman Gonzalez, no matter how questionable it was, he was won like 15 straight fights or so. I mean, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, he won 15 straight fights. Now, keep in mind, of those 15, it was, maybe against somewhat lesser opponents over there in Thailand. And, They weren't, they were all, TKO wins. He was going out and stopping guys, but we don't know how great of a level of competition those gentlemen were. He stepped up, and to his credit, he did not get blown out there when he fought Roman in March. He stood toe for toe and hung in there. So you got to definitely commend him for that. I don't see this being an easy fight for Roman, but I do look for Roman Gonzalez to win, go back out and pick up the WBC Super Flyweight Championship. Now, with that being stated, there's a couple other fights there on the card Saturday night that are also intriguing. This is called Superfly for a reason, folks. It is 6 of the best flyweights there are, super flyweights there are in the world. Another fighter that we're finally going to get an opportunity to see here in America is the gentleman they call the Monster, Inio Inoue. I'm probably misenunciating this. Adam Abramowitz will be back on the show next week. Obviously, we'll recap this card. He'll give the proper pronunciation for these names. I said on Twitter I was going to give everybody's name at least one try. So Inoue, that's his try, a.k.a. the Monster. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Inoue, you have to understand that this gentleman is only 24 years of age. He's only got 13 career fights. But, folks, those 13 career fights, he's a tactician. He has won 11 of those via KO. Again, granted, you don't know how great the competition he's fighting. This is all of his fights over Japan. Saturday night is going to be the first time we're going to be able to see him on American television. And I'm telling you this now, I strongly encourage anyone to go out and YouTube some of his fights or even a highlight reel of it. The guy can crack, he can bang, and he can be entertaining. I think American fans are going to definitely fall in love with him. I think they're really going to like what they see come Saturday. Hopefully I'm not jinxing, but I do think he's going to deliver. I think he's to use a Floyd Mayweather term, he's a hell of a fighter. He's growing and still getting better. Age 24, you've only got 13 career fights. There's so much room for improvement for a guy of only, that young in his career, both in age and in fights. But he's shown in this short amount of time that he can do it and he can fight at a high level. He is the WBO Super Flyweight champion, and he's going to be facing Antonio Neves. Neves is no pushover himself. It's kind of weird that he is in the fight, though, because he is coming off of a loss. He lost a split decision loss here to Nikolaev Patavov here in March. He lost a split decision there. Kind of a questionable fight, but he lost that one. Before that, he had a win. Then he had a draw. So it's not like he's been really, quote-unquote, tearing it up. Coming off of a loss, a win, and a draw. Kind of weird that he's getting a crack at a WBO title. But, the circumstances being what they were, and it was a questionable split decision loss, a close loss. He's getting an opportunity to face Inoue in his first fight here in America. I look for Inoue to go out and beat him. I have watched Neves fight. I'm not blown out of the water winning. He is a very skillful guy, but I think Inoue is just a few steps higher up, which is going to lead to, hopefully, if everything plays out the way it should here after Saturday night, all signs are pointing to the winner of the Ring of the Roman Gonzalez fight facing the winner of Inoue Neves, which hopefully is going to be Inoue and Roman Gonzalez at some juncture here next year. That is the fight a lot of hardcore boxing fans such as myself are looking interested in and really wanting, and we're hoping that, HBO plays this right, because at the end of the day, HBO doesn't have a lot of options left for boxing. These flyweights could be something that could really catch on. But they got to deliver here Saturday night. Both of those fights, both the main event and the co-feature, they have to deliver here Saturday night for the fans to really want to see these guys again. So I'm interested to see, how the numbers go as far as the ratings go and how these fighters perform, because if it's everything we should think it should be, at least what we're assuming with these two fights on paper, Roman Gonzalez and Inoue should face each other at some juncture in 2018 in a hell of a fight to help unify the division with the WBO and WBC belts on the line there in the super flyweight division. But we'll see. But Inoue's a guy, I know you've heard Adam drop his name here on the show a few times this year. He's a guy that you got to definitely watch. He's a hell of a fighter. You're going to be entertained. If you're not entertained, definitely call in on next week's show let me and Adam know why you thought NOL sucked, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. So, and to cap off the Superfly card, you have two former title holders and contenders, Juan Francisco Estrada versus Carlos Quandras. Quandras, was a long-time reigning champion there in the WBC, the long-time running WBC champion there in the super flyweight division, held the belt for an extremely long time, held it for years there until he ran into Roman Gonzalez here last September, and he lost a unanimous decision there. He did pick up a win here in March on the same card as Roman, was kind of hoping to get that rematch, but once Roman lost, well, that pretty much sent that to shit. So instead, now he's going to be facing Juan Francisco Estrada. Estrada's another one of these solid guys, 35 and 2, still young, only age of 27. He's currently riding a very long win streak, a couple of knockouts here in between there. All of his fights, for the most part, throughout his career have been in Mexico, with the exception of him facing Roman Gonzalez, oddly enough, here in the States here about 5 years ago. So, opportunity for him to kind of get his name in the conversation and maybe get a title fight himself. He has fought for championships before and has lost, but he's now looking to get right back on the saddle and get an opportunity to fight for another title here, Sonny. I mean, he did hold at one time the WBA flyweight titles, super flyweight title, and the WBO title. So again, he's looking to get back in the title picture and hunt himself, and possibly even get one of these winners of NOL or Roman Gonzalez. But Quadros is definitely a tough out for him. I look for Quadros to win in a really good fight. And Quadros is really the kind of the quintessential super flyweight. He's fought the best in Roman Gonzalez. He came up short. Didn't do himself any damage in that loss. Really performed well to where, whoever he fights here in the division, they've got a tough out. And so far, no one has been able to crack him besides Roman Gonzalez. And I don't think Saturday night's going to be any different. I look for Quadros to be able to win as well on Saturday night. So the Superfly card, as way as I'm calling it, is Roman Gonzalez will pick up his win, get his redemption, gain back his WBC title. NOL will make a splash here for U.S. fans and retain his WBO title. And Quadros will kind of keep plugging away and kind of see what happens in the rest of the division there on Saturday night as well. So, like I said, 6 of the best super flyweights in the world. Nobody else really of note on the undercard, except for one, which is kind of interesting. For my MMA fans, Nam Pham is a former, I guess still MMA fighter. He's actually going to be fighting here on the undercard. He's one of the first fights of the night. He's boxing. Kind of strange to think about that. This guy's fought in Bellator, Strikeforce, has fought in various organizations over in Japan, and now he's doing boxing. He started off his boxing career years ago, won the first 3 fights, and now pretty much only fights sporadically. Fought once in 2016, once in 2015, and then, it was a large gap. Won his first 3 fights in 2006, 07, and 08, and then didn't fight again for some time. So Nam Pham is going to be fighting here doing boxing. So he's coming off of a loss here last year to Edison Garcia. I don't know. I know you got to do what you got to do to get paid, pay the bills, but I don't know. They got him in there pretty much as an opponent against Nick Frias. Frias is 5-0. One of these guys who fights over there in Thailand. Just kind of coming over to the States. He's promoted by some of the same people. So he's getting exposure, getting an opportunity, kind of a stay busy fight. He's already got another fight planned in Thailand here for later this year. So he's kind of hoping he doesn't have suffer any damage and keep things rolling. So interesting card here set up here for Saturday night. But again, that's going to be on HBO. Superfly. We will definitely recap this show here next week because it's going to be a hell of a card. It's the only reason why I still have my HBO currently connected is to watch Superfly. Once Superfly is over, I will be shutting off HBO for however knows how long. But, yeah, HBO will be no more. All right, had to have a little sip of something there. So we have that here on Saturday. We also on Saturday have a highly, I don't want to say anticipated, because I don't want to build it up that much, but I will say something I'm definitely looking forward to. The World Boxing Super Series is finally going to kick off. We've been hearing about it over the course of the last few months. The card finally happens now. That'll happen here on Saturday, with the first fight part of the tournament being Alexander Usyk versus Marco Huck. That's going to be over in Berlin. If anybody has seen the videos here floating around social media, they had their, their final press conference and face-off this morning over there in Berlin, and Huck's going to get killed. There's just no way around it. I like Marco Huck. Marco Huck has been a valid and entertaining fighter throughout his career, but Usyk is he's a different kind of monster, and you never want to disparage a guy and knock him down before a fight, but it's just certain things, you kind of look at things, you kind of say, you know what, this probably isn't going to end well. For Marco Huck, I think this is probably not going to end well come Saturday in Berlin. Now, Huck is coming off of a loss. He lost here this past April, unanimous decision loss. He won back-to-back fights back over in Germany after suffering a devastating knockout from Krzysztof Goliak back here in 2015. So he used 2016 to kind of get himself physically recovered again. Went back over to Germany, picked up a couple of wins, and then lost one here for the IBO Cruiserweight title and a vacant WBC title. So, for Huck, this is it. This is a make-or-break opportunity here to kind of prove a point and stay a valid fighter in the Cruiserweight division. He's got to win this tournament. I mean, that's just what it is. Now, unfortunately for him, his first-round matchup is against a complete and utter monster in Usyk, and that's just not going to end well for him. It just won't. For anyone who's seen Usyk looks borderline crazy. And I mean that in a good way, but this guy's kind of a scary individual to look at. He won a unanimous decision win here against Michael Hunter this past April. Got introduced here to the States here late last year on a Triple G card. Because, again, he's also promoted by K2, the same promoter. But he's just pretty much going out. He's been destroying guys over in the Ukraine. And he's kind of the guy you kind of have to look at as being one of the favorites here to win the tournament. And I don't think that's without any sort of, disrespect to other fighters involved in the tournament. It's just that he's, maybe leaps and bounds better than the other fighters, at least right now, there in the tournament. And unfortunately for Marco Huck's the first guy up who's going to get wrecked. I just don't like Marco Huck's chances at all here come Saturday over in Berlin. I look for Usyk to just pretty much beat the ever-loving crap out of him. If it lasts 6 rounds, I'll be shocked, but I don't see it going that long. I definitely look for Usyk to get him out of there relatively quickly. But we shall see. I just don't like his chances there at all. But hey, it is what it is. Now, the rest of the tournament will kick off here, pretty much a fight every weekend after that for the next few weeks. You have a fight here on the 16th, the 23rd of September, then the September 30th. So pretty much every week there's a fight. Now, a couple of fights still haven't been completely hammered out for the middleweight tournament and the cruiserweight tournament as well. So they still have 2 matchups to kind of get settled on where they're going to fight and where they're going to fight at. Unfortunately, here for us here in America, as of now, there's no word on when those fights will actually air here or if there'll be any kind of television deal for those. So for all of us watching, all of us listening here to the show who live in America, I wish I knew what to tell you in regards to watching the cards here, but as of now, as we do the show here Wednesday night, there has been no television deal struck with anyone here in the States. There's still a 11th chance hour. It may be able to make ESPN3 to where you can watch it on the app. That's something that I've heard a little bit of rumbling about. They may try to buy some rights to air it through there. I wouldn't bank on it. So it looks like your best bet in order to watch this fight card on Saturday is going to be finding a stream online and getting a German stream, unfortunately. I don't want to be an advocate for pirating fights, but in some situations that's kind of what we're stuck with, and that's what we're going to be stuck with here Saturday in regards to the Usyk Huck fight. Nothing else really on that card that's jumping out. It's a lot of fighters there from the UK, over from Germany that I'm not familiar with at all. So I'm not even going to attempt to enunciate their names because I don't even know who they are. But Huck Usyk is the fight to watch come Saturday. So obviously, if you're following me on Twitter, if I know anything else changed in regards to the fight card and airing in the States, I'll tweet it out, retweet it out if I find out from anyone. But as it stands here, as we do the show Wednesday night, there's no television home for the World Boxing Super Series here in the States, which is unfortunate. Now, there are also fights here on Friday night here in the States that you can see on television. So this is the part of the show where I have to take a deep breath, kind of have to pause for a second, and just kind of got to sit back and just say, this is what we've come to. So there's going to be a fight card here Friday night on Showtime. And we're going to get a Sport Vacant Championship. I want to say it's a WBC title. I'll have to double check it and see. But there's a fight card here, Las Vegas, co-promoted here by Mayweather Promotions and Samson Boxing and TBG Promotions. So they're on Showtime. I think it's a special edition of Championship Boxing. I guess you could consider this Championship Boxing because it is a WBC Super Middleweight Championship on the line. It's one of those things you have to use those terminologies really loosely anymore when we're talking about title fights and what have you. But it is what it is. David Benavidez is going to get his opportunity to challenge for his first world championship. And that's no knock against him. I think he's a great young talent. He's going to be facing Ronald Garville, I think it's Gravel, who's a Mayweather-promoted fighter. The way this fight card ended up happening is, Benavidez was initially supposed to face, I think it was Anthony Durrell, but Durrell ended up pulling out of the fight. And the next highest-ranked guy who's available for the WBC is Gravel, and boom, he gets the fight. Benavidez, at age 20, doesn't turn 21 until December. He's one of those guys you look at, and the sky seems to be the limit for him. He can kind of keep his head on the straight and narrow, but he just really looks to be a hell of a fighter. And for a guy like Benavidez, who's kind of underneath the Heyman and PBC umbrella, we've seen him on some of their cards. They're keeping him busy. This is actually going to be his third fight here of 2017, which is extremely rare for anyone who kind of works with that umbrella of boxing, that they're staying that busy. We saw him just completely light up Porky Medina here this past May on a card. He looked great that night, winning via TKO. But, he's kind of faced a lot of nondescript opponents. Porky Medina was his toughest opponent as of yet throughout his career, and he stepped up to the competition and shined bright. Now, as far as his opponent goes, Ronald Gravel, this is going to be easily his toughest competition to date as well. He's Romanian. He's moved over to the States here some years ago to really pursue and chase this boxing career of his. He's currently riding a 8-fight win streak. He lost a fight here via unanimous decision back in 2015, but since then has he's won fights. He's currently on a 5-fight knockout streak. He beat Darcarlo Perez here this past April. You don't know much about him in regards to seeing him fight because, unfortunately for him, you see him on a lot of you don't see him on a lot of cards. You don't see him on cards at all because he's fighting a lot of these local shows and smaller shows that Mayweather Promotions puts on there in Las Vegas, to where he's on the undercards, to where it's not aired, or it's events that don't even have television cameras there, that they've actually done there for Mayweather Promotions there in Las Vegas. So a lot of people aren't really familiar with him. You have to actually know about the money team and Mayweather Promotions to even really be too familiar with who Ronald is. He's a very strong fighter, heavy-headed guy. At age 31, this is probably going to be his best bet of ever winning a championship. So you've got to really, two different ends of the spectrum here on Friday night on Showtime. You have a guy who's 31, who's, chasing that opportunity and may finally get it here for a championship. And this may be only in his best opportunity to get that title. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have a guy, Benavidez, who's 20 and is already getting that opportunity to step up and become a WBC champion. It's kind of ironic that these two are fighting fighting at this point in this juncture of their careers. I like Benavidez. And I only say that because we've seen more Benavidez. We've had an opportunity to see him grow over the last year to 2 years, getting these television slots and being able to see him participate and fight, to where he looks to be like he could really be the real deal. But we've only really seen him step up one time. Now, is Medina better than Graval? It could be a push. To me, they look like they would be on the same level. So with that being stated, we saw how easily Benavidez took out Medina out. I don't see him having a problem here on Friday night and capturing the vacant WBC super middleweight title. So we'll see. I like Benavidez to win there. Like I said, I just think he's just a better talented guy, and we've seen more of him compared to Ronald. So it's unfortunate. Also on that card on Showtime, you'll be able to see Caleb Plant, Jay Leon Love, another Mayweather promoted fighter, will also be on the card. And then there's one who, as we do the show right now, we think he's going to be on the card, but we really don't know at this juncture. So I have to say this jokingly because he's scheduled to be on, but he has no opponent, and that's Peter Quillin. Now, a lot of listeners may not even know who the hell Peter Quillin is. And I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. They just legitimately may not know who Peter Quillin is. Peter Quillin hasn't fought in nearly 2 years. From all indications, we weren't sure if we'd ever see Peter Quillin fight again, period. And it's kind of a shame because here's a guy who's now, 34, and we haven't seen him fight. His career path has just went very weird. We haven't seen him. Last time we did see him was here in December of 2015. He lost a TKO loss to Daniel Jacobs. It was an ugly, quick fight that Quillin lost. And Quillin literally just faded off in obscurity. I mean, we saw him a couple of times at a couple of PBC events. We saw him looking a lot chunkier. And we've heard that when he does make his return, it will be at super middleweight. But we never knew when that return was going to happen. We didn't think that return would be almost 2 years after his last fight. Now, Quillin has had the opportunity to have big fights. He's, for whatever reason, turned those down. As we all remember, he was offered a lot of money to fight Triple G and turned that down. Seeing how the Jacobs fight ended for him, probably would have ended in far worse fashion if he fought Triple G, but that's neither here nor there. That's now water on the bridge. So we don't know what Peter Quillin is going to look like if he even fights here on Friday night, because as it stands now, there's a couple of gentlemen who have reached out and have been contacted about possibly taking the fight. We don't know if he's going to fight. We don't even know if he has an opponent. So, Peter Quillin's return may get delayed yet again because, here we are less than 48 hours here before the fight and no opponent. Now, there was and I forget the gentleman's name. I'd have to find the tweet, but there was a fighter who said he had been contacted by the promoters involved to fight Peter Quillin. But the thing was, instead of at 168 pounds, which is the super middleweight limit. There was talk of fighting at 170 pounds, 2 pounds over. So it's weird. It's Deshaun Flyboy Johnson who was contacted. So we'll see whether he actually or not here on Friday night. If he does, obviously come next week's show, me and Adam will take a few moments to critique his return, how he looks, if we get an opportunity to even see him on television, because he is going to be so buried underneath that undercard that he may not have any TV time. So it's very weird and strange to see a guy who went from, being a middleweight title holder to relinquishing the titles so he doesn't have to fight Triple G, to, fighting and getting knocked out by Daniel Jacobs, and then just pretty much disappearing for a couple of years. It's strange. A lot of these guys' career paths, but at age 34, time is running out for Peter Quillin to still be able to fight and be fighting at his peak at this juncture of his life. So we shall see. But Peter Quillin, man, we welcome you back. We kind of wonder where you've been, but I honestly, I'd be shocked if we see him fight on Friday. We know this short amount of time and still no opponent name. But this is what we've come to in boxing today. Now, speaking of which, we put up a poll here on Twitter on the Punch the Face radio poll. The question was, we actually put up 2 polls, so we'll talk about the second one here in a moment. The poll was, how hyped are you for the return of, Peter Quillin this Friday? We actually didn't have that many votes, which kind of given the fact we had 2 polls up. One poll got votes. This one literally had 5 people who cared enough about Peter Quillin to vote, which is a shame. 20% said, Peter Quillin's about to take over. 80%, so in other words, for the votes, said, who's Peter Quillin? Like, people just don't know who Peter Quillin is, man. This is what happens when you have this long of a layoff. You kind of have to wonder where his mental state is at, where his heart's at, if his heart is still in boxing after being gone from the sport so long. So it'll be interesting to see if he can fight, how he looks. So I kind of hope they get the opponent nailed down for him. Kind of going to the other end of the spectrum here, speaking of guys fighting and being able to get opponents. A gentleman by the name of Antonio Margarito. Now, we're all, very well aware who Antonio Margarito is. Welterweight for a long time, champion, fought some great fights, fought some controversial fights, possibly with plastered gloves. We only know he got caught one time. Famous for his fights with Miguel Cotto, for taking a beating and having now a permanently damaged eye, fighting Manny Pacquiao. Antonio Margarito fought here over this weekend. He fought down in Mexico, which is pretty much the only place he can get sanctioned to fight. He fought Carson Jones in a very questionable fight that he won via technical decision. The fight ended up going to the scorecards after the doctor stopped the fight when Margarito had a cut above his eye. He was able to survive, but, the stoppage came. Pretty much everyone who saw the fight thought Carson was winning the fight, but hey, the fight was down in Mexico. Margarito winning on the cards, 68-64 and then 67-65 twice. He said that, Jones is a dirty fighter. He thought he was headbutting purposely. He caused the cut. To be honest, Margarito's well past his prime. He's extremely washed, a shell of himself of a fighter. Really, after getting exposed for having the hand wraps when he fought Shane Mosley, he hasn't been the same fighter since then. And I won't let anyone tell me any different. He just does not. You can tell when someone's not right, and you can tell where someone had the advantage against opponents for years, and he had those advantages using those hands. Now Antonio Margarito is a shell of himself, and it's a shame that he's still continuing to fight at this juncture of his career. I mean, he's been a pro fighter here since 1994. I mean, I was junior high when he was still fighting, when he made his professional debut. So, it's sad that at age 39, he's still fighting. And, the damage he suffered above his eye, that eye is never going to be the same, and he's still going. Now, all of his fights over the past few years have been in Mexico. That's, like I said, the only place he can get sanctioned. He did say after the fight that, and I quote, "I will continue my goal to pursue a fight with Miguel Cotto." That's something he still wants. He still wants as a opponent. He wants to retire Miguel Cotto here in December because Miguel Cotto has said that he plans on having his final fight in December. It's a shame that he still wants to fight. He still wants to take damage. And, if anyone has seen these fights in the last 3 years that he has had down in Mexico, they're not great fights. He looks horrible. He's squeaked out a unanimous decision win, won a questionable split decision win here last year against Roman Alvarez, and then he had the technical decision here against Carson Jones, which I thought Carson was winning the fight. He hasn't actually won a legitimate fight in some time, and it's bad. He went from being amongst the best fighters in the world and being a champion and being a title holder to just being here. Still fighting at age 39. I don't know if he has money troubles or what, but, it has to come a certain point in time where someone has to pull him aside and say, stop it. And, fighters don't get it. This is all he knows. But we also know that, he's never going to get cleared medically to fight here in the States. So a fight with Miguel Cotto is not going to happen. Miguel Cotto is not going to go down to Mexico for that fight. The fight wouldn't do. I don't see part of the terminology is saying I don't see, but I don't see Margarito willing to go over to Puerto Rico for the fight. Stranger things have happened, and money talks, but I don't see Golden Boy and Miguel Cotto wanting that fight. Like, what does that fight do for him? Doesn't do anything for Miguel Cotto's legacy. Yes, they're both 1-1 in their fights, but we also know that one fight that Antonio Margarito won, he might have had loaded gloves at that time. It's a distinct possibility he had that. And it's a shame that, he still wants to go and he still wants to fight. Now, one fighter who is interested in fighting fighting Antonio Margarito is Kermit Cintron. Now, Kermit Cintron, who fought Antonio Margarito here way back in 2008, and also believes that his gloves were loaded at that time when he fought him. It was actually the fight before Miguel Cotto. He thinks the gloves are loaded. He will love a rematch. He said via his Facebook page, I quote, "I would love another crack at that piece of shit if my promoter Marshall Kaufman and King's Promotions can make it happen." So Kermit Cintron is more than willing and welcome to fight Antonio Margarito, which would be very interesting because you have two extremely washed fighters willing to fight. So maybe that's the career path that we have and happens for Antonio Margarito. Age 39, Kermit Cintron is 37. Why not? Cintron's coming off of a knockout loss this past June up in Philly. So, hey, why not? If Cintron's willing to go down to Mexico and fight, get a paycheck, but I got no interest in that. That's something they can keep far, far away from my television eyes. No, thank you. But as far as, Antonio Margarito continuing to fight, just let it go, bro. You had a good run throughout your career. You did give us some entertaining fights. You did, to his credit, he fought a lot of the better fighters there is in the world. You have to, make no mistake about it, loaded gloves or not, he has a decent resume. Joshua Clottey was, at the time he's fighting Clottey was no punk. Same way with Kermit Cintron. Fought Kermit Cintron twice, lost to Paul Williams, fought Miguel Cotto twice. You know how those worked. Shane Mosley exposed him, but fought Manny Pacquiao, and to his credit, even in the Pacquiao fight, granted he suffered the over-the-bone injury and his eye will never be the same. He never quit, and he went in there and he suffered a beating for 12 rounds and never quit. So you have to give him that kind of credit. He may not ultimately deserve it, but he really went out and he fought some of the best of his era. Floyd Mayweather avoided him when he won the top-ranked umbrella. So, but it's over. It's done for Antonio Margarito. I don't ever want to see Margarito fight again in my entire life. Keep him away from television. I know he's clamoring to do it again, but keep him away. Somebody needs to be a voice in his ear and say, if you want to be able to see somewhat as you get older, just stop it. Just stop while you're ahead. Don't do it. Move on and find other things to do with your life. Go train some fighters, do something. But this isn't it for him at this juncture of his career. This just isn't it. It shouldn't be the direction he goes. The only other subject here in regards to fights have now been announced. A fight that I actually am pretty interested in, Anthony Joshua, who was kind of wondering who he was going to fight next after the kind of a sudden retirement of Vladimir Klitschko. We were kind of wondering, is he going to fight here in America? There was a lot of names that went on and kind of floating about. But instead he's going to be facing Kabrat Puev for his, his IBF, IBO, and WBA titles that he currently has. So Joshua, had that fantastic fight this past April over in Wembley Stadium against Vladimir Klitschko, where he got off the canvas and was able to rebound, recover, and put Klitschko on the canvas, and subsequently retiring him after that. Now he's going to be facing Puev, who's a solid fighter. I mean, it's kind of the best option available, but at age 36, let's face it, Puev is not a real threat for Anthony Joshua. At least on paper wouldn't seem that way. Puev's long career loss, though, is to Vladimir Klitschko. He did, Puev's career and his resume is not bad. He's beaten guys like Kevin Johnson, Samuel Peter, Derek Chisora, Tony the Tiger Thompson. So he's fought some guys here and there, fought some decent fighters. It's one of those things to where Joshua's this young lion. And as long as Anthony Joshua does not overlook Puev, I don't see any way Puev actually beats him. I don't. I think if he goes out and he does what he's supposed to do, train, and just focus on it and not overlook Puev, he should be able to smash him quite easily there in ring. But, this now hopefully sets up something bigger in 2018 for Joshua. I know this is one of those things where he kind of wanted to keep busy. He wanted to have another fight here before the year was out. The options really weren't ton out there for him, and that's not completely his fault. So, it is what it is, for this fight. I think I'm just excited to see Anthony Joshua fight again. So I don't really care who he's fighting against. I'm just glad to see he's back out there. But Puev should be a decent enough opponent for him to kind of keep him, on his toes and keep him alert. But like I said, if he comes in fully prepared like I expect him to be, it shouldn't be much of an issue for him going forward here in October. So, yeah, October 28th, that'll go down in Wales. I'm assuming it'll probably air here on Showtime here in the States since they do have that contractual agreement with Anthony Joshua and his promoter. So we'll see, but it's interesting to see the continuous growth and improvement of Anthony Joshua. It's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to a fight not of large magnitude like he just came off of. It's kind of a smaller type of fight, smaller energy, smaller stadium. How he'll react to that. Will he still get up for the moment? And that's something you have to always fear as a trainer and a promoter of a lot of these young guys, especially these young champions, that they've had this big, epic, life-changing, career-altering win, how they react in that next fight out that isn't as big and doesn't have as much buzz or energy around it. It's going to be interesting to see how Anthony Joshua reacts to that, how he comes out, how he's prepared come fight night, if he's going to be at the same level that he was at when he fought Klitschko here earlier this year. That was interesting to see. Oh, forgot the other Punch to the Face radio poll. So, like I said, we put up 2 polls this week in regards to this week's show. We read the first one here in regards to Peter Quillin. The other one we had was actually quite interesting. I put out a poll in regards to Antonio Margarito and him continuing to fight. So, the poll went as follows. We had 4 options in regards to Antonio Margarito after his win, what should be his next fight. And here were your options you had here. Kind of some interesting options. You had a trilogy with Miguel Cotto. You had a fight of, and honestly, not this far-fetched if you think about it. You had a fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I think they could probably find a way to meet at. They could probably meet at 160, 165 or something. It's Mexico. They can make up a weight division. WBC would want to make them a belt, we would think. So you had that as an option. You had James Kirkland. James Kirkland's always just kind of a guy dangling out there, currently out there in the same weight class as Margarito. Another cast-off here at 154 pounds. It seems like to be somewhat of a waste of talent. So you had that, and then you had the fourth option of, he should just retire. So, the vote kind of went as this. You had 16% of the votes saying James Kirkland. We also had 16% of the votes saying Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., which I thought was kind of strong numbers for both those guys. The Kirkland fight, I honestly think, would be a fun fight to watch, truth be told. You had 21% of the votes going to a trilogy with Miguel Cotto, and then 47%, a majority of the votes went to he should just retire. So the fight fans have spoken. 47% of our voters, when given those four options, said Margarito should retire. So I agree with him. I think he should retire. If he were to have another fight, the James Kirkland option is not a bad one. If Kirkland can get a passport to even come over to Mexico, that may be kind of a problem, kind of given his record. But that would be fun. The Julio Cesar Chavez fight, it could be a cash-out fight for him in Mexico. I'm assuming and kind of seeing that crowd, Margarito still has some fans and has a fan base in Mexico. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has a fan base in Mexico. I will say this, after his fight in Vegas here this past May and being around a lot of the Mexican fans out there in Vegas, that fan base is dwindling given the fact of his performance that night against Saul Canelo Alvarez. But he still has a base, so why not? Why not make a fight in Mexico? Either fighter can just weigh in at whatever. WBC make up some kind of weird belt that no one really wants or needs and have two guys who are redheaded stepchild of the Mexican boxing culture, have them fight each other, and, the winner still kind of has some respect amongst the Mexican boxing fans. Why not? I would support it. I mean, we've had worse fights. Why not have these two fight? So, but, majority rules and says he should retire, but we know, unfortunately, that won't happen here in the sport of boxing. So we shall see. Shout out to Mr. Otto who says it's sad he needs to retire. I agree. He definitely needs to retire. His career is so far wrapped. Shout out to the folks at Clutch Talk Sports, a.k.a. CT Sports Radio. Make sure you follow them on Twitter. They do a fantastic show as well as on Blog Talk. Somebody needs to tell Margarito to sit down somewhere. Absolutely. I mean, it comes a point in time when fighters need to just let it go. And we're not seeing that enough in the sport of boxing. Thank God Shane Mosley said, I'm going to let it go. Roy Jones Jr. is one of these guys. I'm praying at some juncture just lets it go. He's still actively training, still trying to get fights, but no one's, up to this point has stepped up to give him a fight. Let's hope it stays that way. So, it is what it is. We've had fighters retire this year. Let's hope somehow somebody can talk something in to Antonio Margarito's head to where he can be one of those guys to retire before the year is out. Another quick note, I don't talk much about MMA on the show anymore because, frankly, no one seems to really care about MMA on the show. We get a lot more feedback from my boxing fans and family out here who enjoy talking boxing. MMA fans are a little bit more fickle and, honestly, sometimes they're kind of weirdos. But I have to say this, that I had no genuine idea there was a UFC event this weekend. I had no idea, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm not saying that to be an asshole. I'm saying that to be honest. There's actually a UFC pay-per-view at that goes down here this Saturday night that's going to be live from Canada. It actually has 2 title fights on it. Now, kind of me going on a rant here, but I didn't know about it until looking on Twitter here today. Now, so I knew that they had an event coming up, but had no idea it was this Saturday. And it's an absolute shame on the UFC for poorly promoting this card. Now, I know that, the fighters involved aren't the splashy names, but Demetrius Johnson is fighting to, extend the longest title run and title defenses within the UFC, period. Not just in his weight class, but period. He could break that record as having the most title defenses ever for UFC champion. You're not hearing him doing any big promotion. You're not seeing him on Fox Sports. You're not seeing him on ESPN doing interviews. Nothing. Amanda Nunes is the reigning women's bantamweight champion. She beat the girl who beat the girl, and she looks to be possibly one of the more dominant bantamweight champions we've had. She's actually looking to, make successful defenses of her title, which is something that hasn't happened in the women's bantamweight division since Ronda Rousey. No one's won consecutive fights as being the champion, but you're not hearing anything about that. It's a shame that the UFC got so wrapped up in promoting Mayweather-McGregor, which I said I would not say on the show again after last week. But in this case, I have to talk about it. It's a shame that they got wrapped up in promoting that and promoting Conor McGregor, the boxer, and completely forgetting they run an MMA promotion. There was a fight card last weekend, also the UFC put on UFC Fight Pass. I had no idea that even happened until the next day after it was over. It was poorly promoted. It just seems like they pick and choose what they want to promote, how they want to promote it, which is a damn shame. And if you're a promoter of an event, whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA, whether it's a concert, if you're promoting anything, you call yourself a promoter, you should be promoting what you're doing right now, what's next, not promoting something down the line. What was really disgusting that the UFC did is that they were promoting fights that weren't even, set up yet. George St. Pierre versus Michael Bisping. They were promoting that pay-per-view during their opportunity in their slot during the Mayweather-McGregor pay-per-view. They were promoting a fight that happens in November, and not the fights that were coming up here weeks after this fight. They didn't promote their next pay-per-view, which was UFC 215. No, they completely skipped that and went to 217, promoting the fight card in November. It's an absolute shame. It's disrespectful to the fighters who are involved, and it's going to continue to happen because these fighters are scared. They're scared to say anything, scared of the backlash they may get from Dana White and the powers that be. And MMA writers, and I said this last week, and I'm going to stand by it again, MMA writers are a bunch of pussies. They're scared to say anything because they don't want to lose their media credentials, and they don't want to make anyone mad and not get someone to do their show and all this other BS. But yet still secretly they bitch and complain about stuff like this and then say fighters aren't getting the correct pay they should get. Until you speak up and use your voice to actually express these things, this shit's going to continue to happen. It's called the cycle of life. Until you break that cycle, it's going to continue to happen. Now, more than likely, I will open up my Twitter account Friday morning, and I'll get a tweet from the UFC who DMs me and says, hey, make sure you promote this for us. Make sure you tweet this out. These are the same people who wanted me to tweet out and promote their last 4 events they've had, but yet still they wouldn't give me press credentials to an event they had here in Kansas City here this spring. I don't know them shit. And quite honestly, I'm really sick of their product as a whole. It's nothing against the fighters involved. They're kind of a victim of circumstance in many ways, but, they're just doing a real shit job with this product. And it hasn't been the same since, William Morris Agency bought the UFC now going on 2 years. It's not the same product. It was starting to lose its luster even then when the Fertitta still owned it. But right now it doesn't shine like it used to. It's something I'm not proud to say I cover MMA. Because the first thing they say when we say you cover MMA, the UFC. They don't look at MMA as a whole, as Bellator, as Invicta FC, and ONE FC over in Japan, and to a lesser extent the Professional Fighters League. They don't look at that. They look at, when you say MMA, you think UFC. But it's a shame that they have a fight card here this Saturday. You have arguably the best fighter in the world, pound for pound, in the UFC and in MMA today, and Demetrius Johnson, he's not arguably. He is the number one fighter in the world, pound for pound. And I think you're going to be hard-pressed for anyone to say anything different, but he gets no media attention. Amanda Nunes is probably, top 5 amongst the best female fighters in all weight classes in the world. She gets no attention. It's a shame that it's come to this, that the UFC has to almost kind of hawk something as being a circus sideshow or a quote-unquote mega fight for them to properly promote it. Fight card here this weekend is getting no promotion, but yet still they'll bitch and say, it's because of the fighters involved, the pay-per-view numbers weren't good. No, you're not doing your job as a promoter, promoting the fights, promoting the backstories of these fighters, promoting the fighters themselves to where these fights and these fight cards are going to be successful. So I don't want to hear anybody bitching on social media about how the fight card sucked, or when the pay-per-view numbers come out, how low it is, and say it's Demetrius Johnson's fault, it's Amanda Nunes' fault. No, it's the promoter's fault, because the promoter's supposed to promote, and that's what the UFC's not doing here. So, I encourage everyone, if you're an MMA fan, go out and order the pay-per-view, watch the pay-per-view. If you're not, boxing's on Saturday night on HBO, so you'll have an alternative to watch, and college football's back as well. But, don't feed into that bullshit about the fighters or the people involved in why the fights suck, the fighters and the pay-per-view numbers being low. No, it's the actual promoter not doing their job promoting. So hold them under the fire, MMA media, which I know you won't. Like we do in boxing, we hold the promoters accountable when things go awry as far as fight promotions go. So until MMA media does that and gets out of this way of being scared of Dana White and the UFC, there continue to be pussies in my book. So there it is. There's my rant here of the show. With that being stated, there will be no rant next week. Oh, no rant next week, because my man Admiral Brahmos will be back, because guess what happens next Saturday, folks? Yes, it's finally here. Triple G, Saul Canelo Alvarez, Supremacy, Middleweight Division, Vegas, T-Mobile Arena. So me and Adam will talk about the fight. I am stoked and ready for that. I'm actually going to order that on pay-per-view, get some chicken wings, and just relax and watch that. But that's a week from now. This weekend we got Superfly live on HBO. We have UFC also on pay-per-view. College football is back. It's a good time to be a sports fan. And not to mention the NFL returns here on Sunday as well, and Thursday for our listeners listening to this live. So great time to be a sports fan. But with that being stated, my night's over. So I appreciate everyone tweeting me throughout the show. As always, if you're listening to the show here on iTunes, YouTube, or anything like that, follow me on Twitter at BrandonP2TF as well. You can email me at brandon@punchtheface.com. Also, strongly encourage you to follow my main man and my co-host, Admiral Bromowitz at SN Boxing, and as well follow his product and his terrific writing he does at SaturdayNightBoxing.com. We're a team. He's back next week. We always know the shows are always epic when Adam's a part of it, so I strongly encourage you to listen to that show next week. And if you're listening to the show for the first time, go check the archives on iTunes. Just search Punch the Face Radio. You'll be able to find the shows, both the new ones we're doing here now and the old ones I did for an old network. So you can get to see how I've grown as a podcaster. With that being stated, I want everyone to stay safe, stay blessed. Let's love one another, because it's the only way we're going to get through this. Until next week's show, I'm Brandon Stubbs, and I'm out.
What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. By goal.
I pronounce you.
By wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really?
Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
What you doing?
Ran out of space on my phone, so I'm deleting some stuff. By singing dog. By goal.
I pronounce you.
By wedding ceremony.
Stop. At Metro PCS, you get 2 free phones with twice as much memory.
Really? Don't say bye to your memories. Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free LG K20 Plus phones with 32 gigs when you switch 2 lines. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.